Hello, Dave and Barry.
Hi, Scott. Hey, Dave.
Hey guys. All right. So we are live thanks to our brilliant support staff spanning multiple coasts. So hi, I just want to welcome everybody as people are joining on, I'm sure, and we'll just keep checking in with you throughout this live stream because it's big family here, and some people are going to be here a little bit later, and some people are here now. I'm Dave Finch, and I am co-host of this podcast called Uniquely Human, the podcast, which is a show that celebrates autism and neurodiversity, and but it's much bigger than that because there are so many themes around humanity and being differently wired and sort of the personal and human experience that we touch on in this podcast. Autism is just part of it, but it happens to be a very important part because of our creator and host and the man behind it all, Dr. Barry Prezant. Barry, say hello to everybody.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. We are very, very excited that you are joining us. Just a brief comment about what I do. I am a speech-language pathologist by training and have done almost a half a century of work in the field of supporting families and supporting children and getting to know and collaborating with adults on the spectrum. And that really leads us to our focus tonight, that we're really thrilled to have Scott Steindorff on with us. And Dave, would you like to talk a little bit about the podcast that led to this?
Oh, absolutely. So this was tremendous. If you didn't hear this episode, go back and listen to it. It's our most recent one. It published Friday before last. And we invited on Mr. Steindorff. And I will let Scott talk about himself here in just a minute because he can say it much better than I can. But legendary film and television producer most recently, but at other stages in his life has been successful real estate, we'll say mogul, and also was a champion skier for the United States ski team. So anything you think you're doing in life that's a little bit cool, you're not cool. None of us are compared to this guy's resume. So we had Scott on to talk about his recent-ish diagnosis of autism. And I almost let it tumble out of my mouth because what most doctors would call it is autism spectrum disorder. But the three of us are here because we had a phenomenal discussion about how we don't really see it as a disorder, not in many cases anyway. And it really is a shared human experience, autism. And if you zoom out from that even further, it's not just autism, it's everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's quirky. So what really is normal, right? The key is finding your quirks, understanding them, and then using them to your advantage, which is what Scott's been doing his whole life. And this was a very deeply personal, very affecting conversation that we had. And we've gotten hundreds of responses from people who had a very emotional, intense reaction to this. So what we're going to do is recap that conversation here. If you listen to the episode, you can certainly send us your questions. If you did not listen to the episode, you can listen to us talk and send us your questions and go back and listen to it. So Scott, welcome to our live stream with us.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed our podcast before and admire both of you and love the book Uniquely Human. I found it to resonate with my situation very much, and that's how Barry and I met a couple of years ago, or has it been? And very fond of the work, and I'm also very inspired by the amount of people that reached out after the podcast. I got a lot of very specific interests of moms and dads, parents of kids on the spectrum, a lot of ADHD kids, what to do, what are the best ways to really make their children prosper in life. And so I was disheartened and also very inspired. I was as I've been doing a lot of this advocacy in this field, I'm discovering that there's a lack of understanding. There's a lack of programs, and there's a lot of confusion of how to best handle it.
And not only that, but one of the biggest themes that emerged from that conversation, Scott, is, and Barry, you can speak to this just as deeply, is the stigma of coming out and admitting it. I think, Scott, you shared with us that you would never in a million years share who, because, you know, it's obviously confidential, but, you know, even people that may very well be household names out in Los Angeles were responding, and this was really resonating on a personal level with them as well. But not everybody has the courage or the desire to stand up and say, you know what, I'm autistic, and this is what it means. Barry, what were you going to say before I stepped all over you?
I think that what was most striking to me about Scott's story was the journey, and being so misunderstood when he was young. So Scott, if you want to maybe kind of reiterate some of what happened to you when you were young and you feel now didn't need to have happened to you if people were more in tune with a spectrum profile or wanted to look at you differently. The misunderstanding, the bullying that you experienced was horrific.
Well, you know, from an early age, I was ultra hypersensitive, and in school, I was very withdrawn and had difficulty in school and started getting teased and started getting bullied, and it caused a lot of low self-esteem. It caused communication problems for me. I was having difficulty with speech, expressing feelings, and nobody, my parents didn't even know how bad it was. And then at the age of 10, a teacher took me out of the classroom and said, "You can't make eye contact with everybody. You're glassy-eyed and you're staring into space. We think you're on drugs." And that was when my parents had to go to school and were trying to figure out, you know, was I sniffing paint or sniffing glue? I mean, they didn't even accuse me of it. They were just shocked that I had this incident. And so I think a lot of, and it just, went on for years. And it was something, that I held within. I couldn't share this. I had a lot of shame. I had a lot of stigma over being called horrific names. So it caused me to withdraw inside of myself. And I think a lot of kids go through this. And also I was having, even at a very early age, difficulty with motor skills. I couldn't, my father was a real estate developer and a builder, and I couldn't put a bench together in shop class and flunk shop class. I still am not very mechanical. I don't have great motor skills. And that also was causing great difficulty. But they didn't know, what to do with it. So it was a very difficult time in my life. And the way that I dealt with it was trying to succeed in sports. And, I was lucky enough that I found skiing and I was able to do well at that and ski over my feelings and get some self-worth and self-esteem at something in my life. So, but, today, a lot of the people that have reached out to me because of this and other talks I've done about, a lot of kids are put on Ritalin, a lot of kids are put on Adderall, and that's like pouring gasoline on a fire, and it's the opposite of what I needed. And you can't, I'm wired differently. So I think the biggest thing out of all of this is, how can we better educate kids at elementary school to high school and to university, to be able to learn at their own pace and their own unique style, instead of this testing and rigid. It's a very rigid system, and you're just not going to make me, a square fit in a hole. And that's a lot of problems that parents are having with their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting too, because when you were growing up in that school environment that you're describing, that's when you didn't have intentionally blended classrooms. You just had everybody in the classroom sink or swim, or you might have had a special education program where they completely siloed those other kids away from, the mainstream population. So, and now, using that word silo.
But that, Dave, that's the biggest issue there is in my mind, is the diversity issue. So why should we be separated? What, Black kids and Asian kids and all sorts of things, this is also a big diversity problem.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Scott, I think an important thing you really emphasize is, we talk about the diversity issue, and we're kind of leaning towards the issue of inclusion, but it can't be sink or swim inclusion. That's a big part of your message that's so powerful, is let's respect neurodiversity. Let's respect people think differently. And people need to not misunderstand, but really try to understand how people who have different brains think differently, and begin to have the right accommodations for that, because you speak a lot about all the wonderful support you finally got, but not early on.
Right. And I think that's the biggest issue for children today is, as parents, we want our kids to excel and get good grades and excel at sports and social programs. But what about those kids that don't fit into that model? And they are excluded. They aren't included. And I think that's so.
And I think that part of it, the public school model, just by sheer numbers alone, necessarily comes down to everybody has to be good in every subject, right? All the time. Meaning, oh, I got straight A's in every class. What? Scott, I mean, in any of your business dealings, have you ever dealt with somebody besides maybe Barry, who was like an A+ achiever in literally every aspect of the business? There's no way. We need to be able to cultivate the deep thinkers who will go very deep and very narrow, as opposed to people trying to crank out the generalists. So what are some programs, Barry, that you're seeing? You do a lot of speaking in schools. So elementary, K through 12, everything. And then we'll talk to Scott too about collegiate stuff in just a minute. But what are you seeing that's working well in schools in terms of addressing and supporting?
Dave, you went silent.
Yeah, Dave, you went silent there, but I could read your lips. I think, and it's almost exactly what Scott has done in his life to be successful, that Scott has come to recognize what his talents are and the areas that he needs help and support. So when we talk about a neurodiversity framework, and I can go back a few decades to theories of multiple intelligences, some of us are much brighter in some areas of intelligence, and some of us need support and are much more challenged in other areas. So Scott, if you could talk about that in your life, I mean, because you've spoken before about you recognize what you were good at. I mean, you love stories, you're reading so many books, but you also recognized the types of things that maybe you need to surround yourself with people who can provide that support?
Well, I found theater in, the 8th grade and started performing, and I was writing, before that, and art and creativity and my imagination is my strength. And I have to surround myself with people that have my weaknesses. But I think the biggest issue with all this is school teachers or business people going, well, you have to do those things that you're not good at and learn how to do those and figure that out. Well, my brain doesn't function that way. And all of us, and a lot of people don't create crazy ass things in their head like I can for stories. So that has to be, we have to recognize our strengths and our weaknesses, and not have shame and stigma over our weaknesses. That's the biggest issue. And I think also is that you can't take your kids to a psychiatrist who's having difficulty concentrating in class and probably has some form of ADHD or some spectrum issues, and go to a psychiatrist and get medicine, because that's not going to change anything. What's it going to change? That he can focus on, meth and study? How is it going to allow all those things about brain functions and fitting in and inclusion and emotions? I think the biggest, my autism therapist for the last decade has helped me tremendously I started trying to figure out my feelings. I feel too much. That's also a thing about autism. Well, they have no empathy. I have too much empathy. I feel too much. So I studied everything I could about feelings and teach a course on it, how to identify your feelings, how to process your feelings, how to understand your feelings, how to express your feelings. It's helped me tremendously. And, kids that have meltdowns, and I've had meltdowns my whole life, and we don't want to talk about that, right? I don't want to talk about my meltdowns where I can't process things and I get frustrated and upset and don't handle that like normal people because I don't process it. I've had to work on that, but I'm never going to be like you. I'm not wired the same. So how can we best suit that with our kids and our colleagues, and how can we understand that?
And what you describe as meltdowns, and we talk about dysregulation and some fancy words, extreme dysregulation. That's one of the areas that people who think differently and kind of emote and bring in and try to understand their emotions differently, that's one of the greatest areas of misunderstanding.
Yes, it really is. Or to understand the person that doesn't communicate properly because they can't express what they're trying to say. I mean, that just happened to me in a work situation where somebody was complaining about somebody because they don't communicate properly and they're not expressing the idea, and they're loud when they do it. And all I'm hearing is that person's probably on the spectrum. Why don't you listen to them? Why don't you try to take a different approach towards that person? We need to create such awareness of this issue like we have with diversity, with people that have different skin color or come from different places and different cultures. We need to understand people in this spectrum. Literally. and understand we're all different, and have some empathy, an understanding of why people are doing this.
And Scott, that's such an important part of your mission, because it really is the case that, I think of now that we have the kind of the autism community and we have the larger neurodiversity community, we talk a lot about about those issues to each other within our communities. But in terms of general society, the general public, I mean, where are the TV commercials about, if a child has a meltdown, don't assume he's a brat. That maybe he's overwhelmed by the sensory environment or something else. Yeah.
Or the woman that's having frustration and you call her a bee or she's crazy.
Right.
How many undiagnosed women are neurodivergent out there? There's so many undiagnosed people that are on the spectrum. And that's the biggest thing, is we need to let people know what it is and how they can best handle themselves in their lives. So many people have reached out. I had lunch with an actor today, and I'm telling him what I'm doing, and he says, I may be ADHD, or I may be on the spectrum. I had some friends in New York this weekend, and we were talking about it. Oh, I'm definitely on the spectrum. But they've lived their whole lives not realizing how to deal with it and how to be okay and feel good about themselves, that they're not messing up, that they're not failing at life, So it's like,
and that's, if I could jump in on that, it's interesting from your perspective. And by the way, for the people who are joining us now, we're like 20 minutes into this. We're with Scott Steindorff. He executive produced my favorite film. Actually, the film is the anthem of my life, Chef. I think I joked in the podcast episode that we published last week with Scott that that film and that film alone made me completely unemployable, because it made me rethink my priorities in life. And now I drive a food truck. But I'm being a little literal. But we're with Scott Steindorff, executive producer. He's Station 11. I mean, he has racked up more successes in his life than most people can do in multiple lifetimes. And also want to make a quick mention.
Failed a lot to get there, and and have had to deal with that emotionally too.
And persevered.
Because go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say the perseverance thing is key, and this is something that I know has changed your life. Is
Right.
Just no excuses and just keep moving forward. So when you first received your diagnosis as an adult, autism spectrum.
Well, the Asperger's as an adult, but the ADHD early adulthood. When I had a substance abuse. And that's the other thing is, but you're asking a specific question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, actually, I like where you were going with it. So
I had a substance abuse problem when I was in my early 20s that definitely could have been avoided if I would have had all the information and know who I am today. I just wouldn't have had a substance problem. And there's so many people that are in rehab centers and that have spectrum issues. The underlying causes and conditions, alcohol and drugs is a symptom, and bad behavior is a symptom. So we got to start looking at what's going on under the engine. How is it wired? How are we wired under the engine, and what's going on there, and understand that. And not look at it like I'm broken or I need to be fixed, but that model is different. That is very unique, as Barry would say, that we're all wired differently and we have different skills. We have how many billion people on the planet? 8 billion people. We're all different. And so we need to acknowledge that about ourselves and others, and listen and understand, or how to be a parent, on the spectrum, how to deal with your children. It's taken me a lifetime of not doing the right thing sometimes, and failing and losing my patience and not understanding them and their perspectives. So it's been a journey that I would love to keep learning, and growing and evolving and helping others to learn and evolve, because I think this is a way bigger issue in America and the world than people give it credit.
Scott, I want to get down to kind of, I think, one basic fact, which is a part of your mission. And that is, what impact do you think it would have if more people of influence, if more people with resources, and we've discussed in the past that in some cases it's people who don't know of their own diagnosis or of their own, if you will, developmental profile. And then some people who do, who choose not to come out. But what impact do you think that would have? Because, I mean, you're modeling right now, you're modeling for a lot of people what you wish people of influence would do.
Well, I think in the next year, we're going to see a lot of people start discussing this. And, they keep calling it, I call it emotional health and mental health, not disorders. Quit calling it a disorder. Quit calling me broken. Quit telling me I have something wrong with me. Quit telling kids and pointing the finger, behave when they're having a meltdown. Quit all this BS that didn't work. The model of psychiatry and many cases psychology is so outdated. We need people to understand themselves. There's so many people, if they knew about ADHD or different forms of spectrum issues, would raise their hand and go, I have that. And yes, a lot of Silicon Valley, the internet was created by people with Asperger's. All this innovation, there's a car company called Tesla. There's all these people in Hollywood churning out great stories and films and TV that are also late in life realizing they have this. There's so much misinformation or lack of information and lack of awareness of these issues. And I think we need to, the divergent minds are everywhere, and the non-typical are everywhere. And somebody put a question up, who's typical? I don't know, because those people that think they're typical are behaving in ways that, trigger us. So they're just, people that are claiming to be normal and functional. A lot of those people trigger us that are not typical. So how can those people need to be educated so that they can have compassion and empathy for us?
And I think the partnership piece is so important. Like, Dave and I think, have put together a fairly successful podcast over the last year and a half because of an autistic, quote unquote, neurotypical partnership.
Right.
That Dave has skills and talents that I can't even touch at all. And hopefully I bring something to the podcast that maybe he can't do as well. And I think we're moving in the right direction as far as beginning to understand, more strength-based approaches. But my concern, again, your mission, my concern is, are we getting this out to the general public? Are we getting this out? It's beginning to happen with first responders, with police. Let's not assume this. Let's have mental health people go out if there's, somebody who is becoming very dysregulated in public. But we're just beginning. It seems like there needs to be this blanket smothering of information out to the public.
And it has to be information that's accurate and current, because we know so much more about how our brains and function today than we did 6 months ago. I mean, science is actually evolving at a very rapid rate, and we're understanding about emotions and feelings. We're talking about feelings for the first time, and that's a big part of my work with kids is we're taught not to feel. We're taught, don't get mad, don't get angry. Oh, stop crying. Don't be mad. Oh, quit being so happy. We're taught not to feel at all. And that goes for millions of people. So,
but we're also taught to just keep our mouths shut too. Like you said, Scott, in the workplace, if you constantly have the idea that's going against the current, so many of us are taught like, that's just ridiculous idea. When I was in elementary school, they were teaching us about pollution and what are some things we can do, have the kids come up with these ideas. And I was in third grade, and I said, what we should really do is we should be turning off our cars at red lights, turn them back on when it's green, and we can all go. And they said, that never worked. That's completely impractical. Cars don't work that way. Well, guess what? Every rental car I get in now turns itself off at the damn red light and turns itself back on at the green.
You should have monetized
that elementary school teacher. I know.
You should have captured that.
But you're right. I think that if we have educators who are successfully building, we'll say, inclusive or safe learning environments that encourage diversity of thought, and then we have employers who can take those kids who have been brought up this way over the next couple generations, and the workplaces can create safe environments for diversity of thought and diversity in general. That's kind of the direction we need to go. My thing is, I wish I could wave a magic wand. I couldn't even make automatic stopping cars work. So what do you think, between the two of you two guys, what do you think, do you see on the horizon as like key things that maybe dominoes that need to fall for us to accelerate these safer environments in school, workplace, wherever?
Well, it has to start with parenting, and that's where it has to start. We need to, and Barry knows this as well, as so many parents of low functioning or mid functioning autistic people. My kids don't think I'm high functioning. They would say I'm low functioning some of the time. But it's a hard thing, to parent. These kids come in that aren't high functioning, and it takes a lot of work and attention and love and energy and nurture, and you can't make them like typical. And that's the biggest issue that we've seen in the past decades, is a lot of these programs in schools and parenting trying to take atypical and turn them typical. I'm not going to be able to build a bench. I'm just not wired that way. I don't have those skill sets. So how do I function in life? How do you got to set individual programs. This is not one size fits all. And then the education is just totally outdated, and psychiatry is totally outdated, and psychology, a lot of people claim to know a lot about this, but I think we need more people like me that are on the spectrum speaking, and we need more people. It's like AA, the program was set up for other alcoholics to help alcoholics, and they could relate. And I think it's the same with spectrum. We need more people that can say, hey, I'm doing okay in these areas of my life. I'm struggling in these areas of my life. Everybody struggles. That's the biggest, this thing about typical people is that everybody has their shortcomings. And I can work on some of those issues, but it gets down to the whole education model, testing. It's like, 1 + 1 is 2. It's like there's basics, but then we have to, you brought up the book about the different intelligence. I forget the
Howard Gardner, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
About how, you have all these different buckets of intelligence. you know what's said more than, your bad names for Black people or Latin people. You know what word is probably the most one of just as hurtful, not taken away from that, is you're stupid. You're dumb. You're an idiot. I mean, to an autistic, that's just devastating. And
go ahead, Scott.
And depression, the self-esteem issues and getting depressed, and this whole theory that take a pill is not going to solve it. I become very strong about antidepressants and Adderall and Ritalin because I've seen it destroy lives and kill people. And so I do believe there are medications for people that need to be, but there are some very harmful medications that are destroying lives, where parents are taught, from the psychiatrist, take this Adderall and your kid's going to be able to function. It's not going to change his ADHD.
Scott, it's interesting. You were talking about functioning levels a little while back. And I think you also described why functioning labels maybe are not that helpful in a sense. Right. Because I know parents of kids who need a lot of support in their lives, but they're also able to go beyond thinking that my son or my daughter's low functioning by seeing their strengths.
Exactly.
And really building upon their strengths. And that's why that's so vital. And it's something, again, that you've done in your life. You've seen what you were good at. And now, at this point in your journey, I hope you don't mind me saying that you're older than 60, And at this point in your journey, you're reflecting back on your whole life, and you're saying, I don't want to happen to other people and to other kids what happened to me, because it didn't have to happen.
Exactly. And that's exactly why I want to take away suffering of parents and kids that they don't. I want to fight for them, and I am fighting for them.
Yes.
Because it's very important.
It's critically important, and especially to have somebody at your stature in life, Scott, who's achieved what you've achieved and doing it in spite of, and in some ways even with the help of, your neurological differences. So we have about 7 or 8 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we look at some of the questions here, and some of the comments. We've been getting amazing comments about parenting, about education, about research. Scott, what are you doing in your day-to-day, like in your mission to be able to do this? Do you have time to be working with kids, presenting at Arizona State? What are the sorts of things that you're doing now that you'd like people to be aware of in terms of getting the word out, destigmatizing autism?
Well, I'm doing a documentary on it about the accurate ways that we can help people and have better lives for people on the spectrum. We're setting up a testing facility at ASU to test people and look at the brains and look at behaviors, because somebody in my life, several people in my life recently, because of the podcast, wanted to get tested. The wait time to get tested is 2 months. It's $5,000. It's like, how does somebody that has no resources, no money, struggling in life pay for that? So we need better testing. We need psychologists and psychiatrists. We have a program at ASU where we're going to train counselors to understand this and better notice this, to get into the school system and to say, hey, you've got to make a different. My kid can't take a test in 3 hours. It's going to take them 5 hours or 2 days. Mm-hmm. And what are we teaching? So I think education, parenting, and real information and I'm writing about it right now, a manual of how to better function. You know, I realized at 62 years old, I never really had a job. I've always had to work for something in my life. So I had to create a skill set that I've got to make a movie or build a building or do something to create revenue so I can live. And not everybody can do that. And what are the employment opportunities for people that are on the spectrum? I'm in an industry that is very creative, and there's literally minimal programs. There's a great program where they're teaching kids on computers, Exceptional Minds. There's some great training, but we can do way better. That you know, what about the person that has autism that's functioning, but he can barely hold down a job or a relationship? All those areas concern me for people to have better lives. And I've struggled with all of that in my life, you know, to understand other people, to communicate with other people. It's my number one mission in my life. It's above everything, you know, is to do this work and do this work in the work I do. So I'm very fond of both of you with this podcast and wanting lots of people to hear this and different people get on this program and talk about it in this industry. There shouldn't be shame and stigma about saying I'm autistic. I still, in certain, you know, settings, should I say it? You know,
Right.
And yet I'm discovering so many people have ADHD or different forms that are undiagnosed. And they don't understand what ADHD is and how it causes problems in relationships, how it causes problems in employment, how it causes function. So rather than take a pill, I want people to have better lives and learn how they can deal with this and have a better life. That's simple.
You know, and Scott, I guess as I'm thinking of the last part of the journey that you're on, and of course it will continue for many years, is your self-awareness. It is, which has to do with understanding your diagnoses, understanding the impact that it has, not blaming yourself, because during our podcast episode, you spoke a lot about the shame and the internalized stigma that you felt.
And so many people feel that and they don't know why, right? And so let's give them information so they don't have to feel that shame or feel down about themselves.
That's right. That's right. And also demonstrate that we see the full person, the whole person.
Yes.
That we don't see what I used to refer to, I still refer to as kind of the deficit checklist. Here are the things you can't do. That doesn't help anybody.
No. Yeah.
No.
And so, you know, it's like, and getting into people with your skills into a setting with other like-minded people to create and to create business. I mean, Silicon Valley was built on people on the spectrum. You know, some of the greatest things in life have been created because we're looking at it from a different angle.
That's right.
So, and to be able to, you know, not feel shame about that, right? Like that I go to a party and I feel very uncomfortable. I go to a premiere of my TV show and feel very uncomfortable, you know, and I can find a way to celebrate
and that,
you know, your wins in life
and celebrate who you are. And that's the important piece. That's the bottom line. Yeah. Well, Scott, this has been
absolutely
terrific. I think so important. I think you are modeling what we need more and more people to be able to do. But in many ways, you're modeling by talking about, the trials and tribulations and the successes in your life, but you're also modeling for other people how this is the first step to really change societal view of people who think differently because they're neurodivergent. I mean, it's that simple, different brains. Yeah.
Yeah. And be treated, that we are diverse and able to be included and not excluded, and not be excluded from jobs and not be excluded. So many people don't get the opportunities I've had in life. They don't know how to hustle. They don't know how to, I just had skills and was raised in a way that I was able to do that in life. So,
yes. Thank you, Scott, for so many things.
Just one more question that looks very important.
Sure.
Yeah. I am a parent of a 14-year-old. This is from somebody named Barry.
Let's see.
Go ahead.
I'm a parent of a 14-year-old high-functioning autistic daughter, but let me say again, you could be high-functioning and real challenged in other areas. She has little ability to identify her emotions or emotions of others. Her meltdowns can be downright frightening. What helped you, Scott?
To dive into understanding how I felt. The first part is teaching her how to identify her feelings and then how to process them and to understand them, and then how to express them. And that simple program has helped me tremendously. It doesn't mean I don't have meltdowns. It doesn't mean I don't have excessive feelings, but I started learning about it, and I work with kids to help them with that. Do I know of any therapists who work remotely with people on the spectrum? Email me, and here's the thing, you can find me on Instagram, or probably the best place, because I'm maxed out on all the other sites. I answer everybody's direct message. I will help anybody with their kid have a better life. I don't care who it is. So I'm here for everybody. So thank you so much. Go watch my show. Station 11 just came out today on HBO Max if you haven't.
Oh my goodness. Like ranked New York Times, Rolling Stone, best show of the year. I mean, it's been incredible. Yes. Station 11, that is. So another success.
It's about connection.
Yes.
So I'm very proud of the show because it's about people connecting with each other. Also, you'll see elements of diversity in this show. So
wonderful.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks, everybody.